Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and all this new Nintendo controversy has been rather exhausting. So, we've actually gotten a decent amount of news over the last 24 hours or so. We got the Mario Galaxy Movie Direct, we got over a 10-minute presentation on Pokopia, and there's been a lot of talk about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and we know we're going to be getting previews on the game tomorrow. And from these different situations, there's been a lot of takes online throughout social media that I find exhausting. Like, just this overall conversation surrounding Nintendo throughout the entire Switch 2 era has been very negative, and as we talked about a few days ago, this negativity we're seeing online does not seem to be actually representative of how the public feels about the Switch 2, because the Switch 2 continues to be the fastest selling console in history by a few million. It's not even by a close margin here. And so the Switch 2 is doing extremely well, but the conversation online has been exhausting. It's pushing me away from wanting to be online, and it's just tiring. I just don't think it's healthy. Now, listen, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and I'm open to having discussions on different opinions. I encourage it. I invite it. But I also take issue with people just constantly jumping to being negative and critical with minimal evidence. That doesn't sit well with me. So there are things being said about Metroid Prime 4 and the Mario Galaxy movie that I don't think are fair at all. Now, in regards to Pokopia, I think that might be a little bit more fair, and so that's certainly worthy of conversation. But I want to talk about all three of these subjects in one video because, well, it's all the recent news that's been happening, so yes, this is going to be more of a general news video focused on these three different topics, but also me just airing out all my opinions on this negativity in one video, and helping myself to keep away from just diving into this exhausting negative conversation that's happening throughout social media. But before going forward, let me point out that I do have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers. So if you find yourself enjoying this video or some of my other videos, I would very much appreciate your support, be that through a subscription, liking the video, hyping the video. It all helps this video to reach a larger audience, so I'd very much appreciate your support, but I at least thank you for coming by to watch today's video. So jumping into the Pokopia situation first, we got a whole bunch of new Pokopia news, and I actually find a lot of it to be rather interesting. We're getting a little bit more details on this abandoned world for Pokopia. Like, there are more indications of this being a post-apocalyptic world where people are no longer around. When this game was first introduced, there was like an old dusted up Pokedex, and we saw like a picture of a trainer, but we couldn't see their face. And so the Ditto had a trainer once upon a time and is now taking the form of the trainer, and that's kind of dark and sad, which I do find interesting. And then we see a destroyed Pokemon Center with this latest footage, and we see this new tan growth that has seen signs of age, as we see the tops of the tan growth have gone white. So I'm actually intrigued by these details, and they also introduced other new Pokemon like Pikachu, who's apparently some sort of ghostly-like Pikachu, which could have its own dark interpretations. Maybe it's a Pikachu that died but is still hanging around in a ghostly form. And then we have a Snorlax that's been in an extremely long slumber, so much so that moss has grown all over it. How long has it been asleep? Perhaps the last time it was awake was when people were still around. And so there's some interesting lore stuff going on here with Pokopia that is actually getting me more interested in the game. And then we've seen some new gameplay as well, and we're seeing that there's actually a decent amount of interactivity with the Pokemon. You can fly around to different islands, you can surf around to different islands, all the Pokemon do different things throughout the environment. Like, this may be a cozy game, which personally isn't really up my alley, but with these elements, I am actually intrigued by Pokopia. Like, I might give it a try. However, and this is getting into some of the controversial stuff, we now know with certainty that Pokopia is going to be a game keycard. And from what's said on the card, it's going to be a 10 gigabyte game, it looks like. That's not a very big game. They could have put out a cartridge to fit Pokopia, yet they've decided to do a game key card instead. And this is a Nintendo published title, which is certainly stirring a lot of conversation and raising concerns, because it was at least thought that Nintendo games wouldn't be game key cards. Now, Nintendo has said that Nintendo developed titles won't be game key cards, and Pokopia is not a Nintendo developed title, it's made by Koei Tecmo. And so no promises were broken here, but it still does suggest that there can be other Nintendo published non-developed by them titles that could be game key cards. And there are many people who do not like game key cards. Personally, for a game like Pokopia, I probably wouldn't care to have a physical version of it anyway, so if I do decide to pick it up, getting it digitally wouldn't be an issue for me, especially because it's not that big of a file size, unlike, for example, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which I think is like 30 to 40 gigabytes or something. It takes up a lot more space, so for that one, I made sure to get it physically. And also, with Zelda things, I'm a lot more inclined to buy those things physically because I like to have them as a huge Zelda fan. But another talking point that's come out from this Pokopia situation is that this game shouldn't be priced at $70 USD, $69.99. And I'm not sure I agree with this take. I'm not here trying to promise that the game is going to be good and that it's going to absolutely be worth the price for everyone. I think obviously that's going to come down to each individual person, and really my opinion on how games should be priced just comes down to the economics of the situation. If a company decides on a certain price for the game, and the market dictates that it sells well at that price, then that is a valid price. Now, if the company puts out the game and it does not sell well at that price, then perhaps they overpriced the game. And so, really, that's my opinion on the matter. We'll see how the game performs. I think most people are expecting this game to sell millions, even with it being a fully priced title. And that's the thing here, this is the new standard. $70 USD is the new standard for fully fledged titles on Nintendo Switch 2 and just across the industry. But I've seen opinions online that cozy games shouldn't be full priced games, which I don't agree with. I'm not even that much of a fan of cozy style games. Like, I struggle to play most cozy style games for extended periods of time. Even Animal Crossing, I can't manage to find a way to put more than 20 to 30 hours before losing interest, which I know is an issue, but I think it just speaks to the point that this kind of genre isn't really for me, and yet I'm not here trying to say that cozy games aren't worth the price of full-priced games. It's just a genre. A game's genre shouldn't tell us how it should be priced. Like, there can be puzzle games that can be full-priced, there can be adventure games that can be full-priced, and then there are puzzle and adventure games that can be more cheaply priced. It comes down to what the company decides and what they can get away with, basically. Ultimately, the consumer decides if a product is worth the price. If people are buying it, then that's it. It's worth the price. And if it's not worth it for you, that's totally fine. But going back to the game keycard situation, I just want to say that given all the controversy that has been surrounding Pokemon as of late, this is just one more thing that people are going to get angry about, and it's just becoming something that's almost expected when it comes to Pokemon. But we've talked about this so many times before, I really don't want to continue to dive into this topic. Let's just move on to the Mario Galaxy movie situation. So, I'm finally going to talk about this. I know I talked about doing a live stream for this direct yesterday morning, but things came up yesterday morning. I was not really able to do it. But it wasn't even really that long of a presentation. It was a 7+ minute direct, and that was it. It wasn't long. But we got the trailer, and I liked the trailer. I think it was cool. I liked that there was a decent amount of different mainline Mario references, with Bowser Jr. changing into his Wonder form from Mario Wonder, with us seeing Toast Arena and the Pyramid in the Sand from Mario Odyssey. And then simply with the inclusion of Bowser Jr. and his brush, and then also that scene where Peach is fighting all the different ninjas in a casino, it reminds me of Mario Sunshine. And of course, this Galaxy movie has tons of Galaxy references, so it's cool to see all these different references to different Mario games. I also really appreciated how when Bowser was coming up his little mini castle, he was singing his theme song from the boss fights in Mario 64, which was cool. And then also seeing the painting he put together of Mario in his skeleton form from Mario Odyssey, as also foreshadowing of what he was about to say to Mario of wanting to burn his flesh off. It's dark, but funny, and it's a nice attention to detail. Like, I do like what we saw with the trailer overall, but the big highlight for me was Rosalina. I really loved how her design was put together. I loved her actions. I loved how she took out Mega Leg from Mario Galaxy, another cool reference there. And we see that she's seemingly in her own planet or environment. This is not the Mushroom Kingdom, so there's something interesting there from a lore perspective, and people are theorizing that perhaps Rosalina and Peach are related because from the first Mario movie, Princess Peach talks about how she doesn't know where she's from, and she does make this reference to the galaxies, which seems like foreshadowing to Mario Galaxy, or at least a reference, and now clearly it was foreshadowing because we have the Mario Galaxy movie, and perhaps it's also a hint towards her connection to Rosalina. Some people are theorizing that Rosalina is perhaps Peach's mother. I actually think that if there is some sort of familial relation, it's more likely the case that Rosalina is Peach's big sister. She does clearly have a more mature voice, and I'll get to her voice actor choice in a moment here, but she still does have a youth to her, clearly. And I think it would make more sense to have her be Peach's big sister so she can feel as more part of the main cast. If she was her mother, that's more detaching and would perhaps be a little bit harder for people to see her involved with the current cast of Mario characters. I'm not saying an older character can't be involved, it's just from a design perspective, if you want this character to befriend you on equal terms and be hanging around, doing fun stuff together, going on adventures, then being in a similar age group makes more sense to me. So Rosalina being Peach's big sister makes more sense to me than being her mother, and like I said, it still seems like she has a decent amount of youth to her. We'll see what actually happens with the movie though, but that's my current theory. Now, where the controversy comes from with this is the whole voice actor choice of Brie Larson as Rosalina. And let me just tell you what I think. I think this was actually a fantastic choice. I think her voice is perfect for the role. I actually love that Brie Larson, a Super Nintendo fan, like she's been in so many different Nintendo ads, we see her just talking about how she loves Animal Crossing and Mario Kart and Smash Brothers and Mario and Samus. Like, she's clearly actually a true Nintendo fan. There's even a video going around of her talking about how years ago she kicked out her boyfriend because he had issues with her playing the last level of Mario Galaxy, which is a funny story, but it just goes to show how much of a fan she is of Mario Galaxy, and that goes to show she likely was super excited to take on the role of Rosalina. This is probably a dream come true for her. And actually, there is another bit of footage that came out. She put out a statement that she recorded months ago when she was at Super Nintendo World, before it was open to the public, her talking about how excited she was to play Rosalina. So, she's super stoked for the role, she's a huge Nintendo fan, understands the lore, and she's actually, I would say, a great actress, and from what we've heard of the voice acting, she's done a wonderful job. However, there are people who are not a fan of Brie Larson. They do not like what she said regarding her role for Captain Marvel years ago, and so because of this, some people are just not going to watch the movie. And personally, I think that's not fair. Like, I'm not saying you have to agree with what she said years ago, but it's not like she's making her inclusion in this movie or most of her projects as some sort of huge political statement. That's not really part of the conversation at all. She's a huge fan who wants to do the role justice. So as long as the movie's not impacted in any negative way, why should it matter? It just seems a bit extremist to me, but at the same time, I recognize that this opinion is likely just a vocal minority that seems quite prevalent when you're on social media, but in actuality is not really representative of how most people feel about the situation. Earlier this week, I put out a video about the sales numbers of Switch 2 and how it's the fastest selling console of all time by a few million so far. But if you just pay attention to the opinions online, you would not think that would even be remotely possible. And it just goes to show that, yeah, there's a vocal minority of people online that are unhappy about the situation surrounding Switch 2, but whatever those feelings are for people online, that doesn't seem to reflect with the actual sales of the console. And I'm sure that's also going to apply with the Mario Galaxy movie. But let's move on to one more subject here, and to me it's the most important one, because it's about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Previews are coming out tomorrow. Yes, I will make sure to be on top of my game, and we will be talking about all the news that comes out about this tomorrow. There will be a deep analysis tomorrow, probably, and more so throughout the weekend. And no, there has been no announcement for a Metroid Prime 4 Direct so far. People are losing hope, I would say understandably so, but I also think Nintendo still needs to talk about this game, and in whatever form that comes in, perhaps a Direct or not, we'll see very soon, beyond just these previews. But in lead up to this news that we're going to be getting, there's been a conversation online that has really taken up a lot more attention than I expected it would. And that's just a recent tweet from Nintendo talking about using Viola, Samus's motorcycle, in the sands of Viros. People are taking one screenshot from a trailer that came out back in September of the desert and are talking about how the graphics are terrible and how there's nothing to do in this world and how this really makes Metroid Prime 4 look like a bland or boring game, and insinuating that's all there is to the game, which I think is a completely baloney take. First off, if there is a game that deserves the benefit of the doubt, I would say it's Metroid Prime 4. We are talking about a game that is a follow-up to some of the most critically acclaimed games of all time. Retro Studios, a wholly owned Nintendo developer, has never put out a bad game. Never. Their most recent release was Metroid Prime Remastered, one of the most critically acclaimed games on the Switch 1. Now, yes, it's a remaster, but it's also the most visually impressive remaster we have seen on Switch 1. Retro Studios, for every game they've worked on, they've been known for their attention to detail, for their polish, for spending a lot of extra time on making sure everything to their environments runs and looks fantastic and unique. So when people are jumping to conclusions because Nintendo hasn't revealed everything there is about the game, because why would they? And they're just assuming that what they see is all there is, especially when we have this history of Retro Studios games, it just doesn't seem fair. Like, if you want to be cautious about it, sure, but jumping to the conclusion that this is obviously a bad thing, I just don't think that's the right perspective. I think people need to be open-minded about this, and honestly, I'm pretty darn confident that once we learn more about Metroid Prime 4, people are going to realize the desert's actually pretty fire. So, I'm just putting that out there. I don't think it's fair to assume this is going to be bad. And I actually think if you take the time to analyze more deeply, from what we have seen of the desert so far, it's not as bad as some people are portraying it to be. We've already seen there's a variety of different enemies to fight. We have already seen there's actually a lot of different interactions Samus can do with Viola. She has the multi-target seeker missile, she has the energy dash, she has the wheelie attack, she moves around very quickly. But we've also seen throughout the desert there's a lot of ruins that are begging to be explored. What is there? We also know about the crystals that we can break down and find resources there. So between enemies and ruins and just different structures and rocks that we can break, like, there's already some things to do in the desert. Like, we think about The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, people talk about how, like, that ocean has ocean. That's what it is. It's an ocean, and this is a desert. The ocean's a cool thing about The Wind Waker. I'm sure the desert's going to be a cool thing about Metroid Prime 4. It just seems like whenever there's a vast expanse in a Nintendo game, or just games in general, people like to say, oh, it's just a barren environment. It's a vast environment, and we have a super fast motorcycle that can do a whole bunch of cool things to explore it, and we've only seen a few seconds of footage of this environment so far. I would say Nintendo and Retro Studios deserve the benefit of the doubt here. But those are my thoughts on the matter. I'm looking forward to learning more about Metroid Prime 4 and the Mario Galaxy movie, and even Pokopia, even though I'm not sure I'm going to buy that one. We'll see how things pan out. But what do you all think? What do you make of all this news and just this constant negativity surrounding Nintendo? Tell me in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.